Hello, I'm David Charkham and I'm one of the trustees of the Outside Edge, and I'm with two of our patrons, Simon Woodroffe and Jimmy Page, and we're just trying to go down memory lane. Remember when we all got involved? I got involved many years ago. I was a friend of Phil Fox, and he told me about what he was doing, and I only needed to see it once and I was hooked. I think it's the most extraordinary, special, magical, artistic outlet for people early in recovery who often will have low self-worth, be very nervous, but have some idea of wanting to be involved in the theatre. Not necessarily just as actors. It could be design, it could be direction, it could be lighting. And then I brought Jimmy in, we think possibly around 2006.
I think it's about that. Yeah.
And then Simon came a bit later. He saw a production.
I saw the Bill W show, which is a two-handed show at Riverside, wasn't it?
That's right.
And there's always been a thing in recovery that you shouldn't, it's protraction, not promotion. And of course, being a businessman, I thought, well, actually, this is going out to somebody once told me that 10% of people in America had been to a 12-step meeting, and there were millions and millions of them. And I thought, well, maybe one day there'll be more. So I was very pro. In fact, I asked some people in New York to put it on. It never really happened, but that was a really, really great show, the Bill W show. And that's where I met Phil Fox. And he had a sort of, who's sadly no longer with us, but he had a very softly, seductive way, and he became a friend actually, really, and I used to look forward to him coming round to talk about it, and then it all kind of unfolded from there.
David took me along to see a performance, and he was more or less one of these things, come along, I'd like you to see this theatre group. And and the production that I saw, it was Crossing Borders. Well done. Yeah. That's what it was. Okay. So and then I must say that it was an interactive performance, and they were interacting with the cast. We had taking questions from the audience. I thought, this is really fascinating stuff. And then it was explained to me that these people had been addicts and that they were working on it. And I think it's the next time round that I came along to something that I met Phil, and Phil was such a marvellous person, and I got more of an idea of what was going on at the workshops and how he was bringing on people who maybe had had a little acting experience, others who hadn't, in the workshops, and that they were working on their own scripts, and he had quite a magical way of bringing it out of these people, and in a very short time you would find that they would get a production together, and I must say the power of it, the power of what there was then and still is now, even more so in a way now, that they've had more and more confidence. And I've seen a good number of the productions, and I know Simon has, and obviously David, and it's really quite something to behold and actually be part of as an audience. I'm very proud to be a patron for Outside Edge. What I've seen is self-esteem grow in people collectively, and they all feel part of an active unit. And you see the productions mutating as they're writing it. And as I say, it's extraordinary, because it's like no time is wasted whatsoever. Every minute that they're investing into the workshop seems to be so well spent. It's extraordinary.
Because we go to a lot of the drop-ins and watch the rehearsal, and we've actually witnessed storylines being developed, which I found really powerful. And then we get to see the finished product. But I think we all feel strongly about getting down to rehearsals, getting involved and watching the development. And I find that as thrilling as actually watching the end product. All sorts of things happen. Some people follow a professional route. Maybe some people don't. But I think when you said about the importance of drama, it is. It's about self-worth. It's about becoming comfortable in your own skin. It's about having a safe environment to express yourself. Because remember, when people come out of rehab, they have low self-worth, or they're fragile. And they're very nervous days. So it's a safe, what we've witnessed is a safe environment for people to explore. And now under the direction of Susie Miller, who's taking it on to more development. And also, I also would like to mention Mark Rylance's involvement, because that's opened a lot of doors for us. He also has supported it as much as you guys, and he comes and he turns up whenever he's in England. So it's
he's a good example here, Mark Rylance, because a lot of the actors and actresses I've known, when they're preparing for a role, they get so totally immersed in that person and who they are. And, there's something very powerful. I think we'll get a great actor out of it, actually, out of Outside Edge.
We certainly did with Sonia, the writer, who I saw in a women's halfway house years ago and said, I think this might be good for you. And she's become a young poet at the Royal Court. She's here doing a writing workshop with Outside Edge, and we knew her from the beginning, didn't we?
We certainly did, yeah. Her performance was so
Her performance
intense,
is powerful, and this is stuff she's writing herself.
Yeah.
We're old men.
Yeah.
We're old men.
Yeah.
So this is another generation coming up, putting their power and passion into something, and I think you'll see amazing things that we don't even know about come out of it.
Yeah, I agree, they're youngsters.
We can be old men now.
We can, yeah.
And what's the scale of it, actually? How many people are involved? And
Well, I think the thing is, it's not we see the theatre group, but to get to the theatre group, they need to come to it's not like turn up and meet Mark Rylance and be in a play. It's turn up to the general workshop, which I'm sure Susie will be able to explain more in detail. But they go through a process. There's a drop-in.
Wednesday nights.
Thank you very much. There's a drop-in for anybody. There's also a women's drop-in. And out of that, as I understand, they start to discuss things and plan things. And then after X weeks, or really when they're ready, because it's very important not to overload someone in early recovery. I mean, I've learned that from my own experience, and certainly people that I've worked with. Too much too soon is not good. So I'm very happy to know that they ease people in, so that by the time we've seen them, they've done quite a bit of work before they're in the final creative process. We'll often come up with a piece, and they will tour treatment centres or health facilities. And there is a lot.
All commercial shows.
Commercial shows. There was at Hoxton.
That's where it's going, I hope.
It's commercial.
Yes.
But also, one thing that people don't notice, but Phil was keen on, what about the social services? What about, we've heard today talk about social services removing children. Phil discovered that a lot of those social workers had no actual live rehearsal doing it. And I think there's a big market for actually putting those social workers, giving them a rehearsal with actors before you go in and remove a child.
That's
that's not the commercial side, but I think it's a needy
almost like
side.
training video.
Absolutely.
Or training.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and there's a musical side, there's a poetry side, there's a writing side.
Well, there's a great vibe in the room, isn't there, when we go down there? And I've heard when you say something good about the music or something, you can see them.
Yeah. It's not all as David quite rightly says. It's that there is music, there's poetry, there's drama, and every now and again there'll be a little bit of music in one of the performances, but not always.
No,
not always.
We had music at Hoxton, didn't we?
They did, yeah. That was a musical,
Right.
but it's
also-
fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating to witness these workshops and seeing these seeds, blossom and coming. Not only as the performers, but actually of what's written, the written performance, or how they improvise it and collectively all work together. I mean, it's very powerful, that.
And they can, when they've got the funding, they can bring in a couple of professional actors, which we've seen at Hoxton, and that can marry up really well.
How does that work?
Well, Phil and I were both actors, and we met 30 years ago in very early recovery, and we just started with doing workshops for ourselves because we wanted to get that confidence back. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I love. I mean, I'm much happier, actually, mostly sitting in a rehearsal of Outside Edge and performing.
I think one of the things that I found really moving was when Phil Fox passed. I called up David and said, let's go down to the workshop and see what's going on. Don't let anybody know. We'll just go and see what's going on. I mean, maybe there wasn't going to be anybody there, and then we'd try and resuscitate it in another way. But we went down there, and it was very shortly after Phil had passed, and And we went down there, and the workshop was alive and well, and everyone, I thought, well, this is exactly what Phil would have wanted.
And then there was some drama after Phil died, and there was a wobble and a thing. And then out of that became something that is stronger today than it was with Phil, I think that's a volcano came out of that.
Yeah.
When Bill W. Actually handed over the leadership of AA to the people of AA, there was a wobble. Because he was a complete megalomaniac when he started the thing. Things don't start unless you have, megalomaniacs start things, is the truth. But to actually keep them, to allow them to grow, and he allowed AA to grow by handing it over. And in the same way, Phil's passing allowed it to grow, and the volcano that came out of it was everybody who's part of it today. And I still think it's the very tip of that volcano, the tip of the iceberg, and that we will see this idea. It's maturing itself now. Things have a way of growing at their own speed, and it will grow into something much bigger than just us.
When we go to those workshops, at the end they do a check-in at the beginning and they do a check-out, and we always are involved in the check-out. And every time I'm there, I feel Phil's spirit is with us. Yeah. I get that sense, don't you? That he's still around. It's sort of present.
I started off in theatre. I left school with 2 O-levels, and after a few years of sort of doing peace signs and really meaning them, in those days, all the things we did in those days. I looked in the back of the stage newspaper, and for 10 bob a day, 50p a day, I got a job at the little theatre club in St Martin's Lane doing the lights. And I became a stage manager and was in rock and roll and all sorts, doing the production side. And that's how I started off. So I go way back to theatre. It's in those days, of course, if you knew, I wanted to get away from the lovers of the theatre. If you knew your stage left from your stage right, you're an expert in rock and roll in the early days, so I was out there.
Yeah, well, I've been involved in music, so there's a sort of theatre in there. But actually, I must say that the manager of Led Zeppelin, he started off moving scenery around in the theatre.
Peter Rundon?
Yeah.
Did he really?
Yeah, that's what he started off.
A lot of us did.
Yeah.
I've lived theatre since I was a young boy on eight quid a week at Richmond Theatre. So I suppose, I know what it's the gentlemen and the beginners, the beginning of the show, the smell of the size in the paint shops, what the feeling of a theatre backstage is. I've lived and breathed that all my life. Yeah. So I suppose when this came along, I went, I understand this. This is part of my life. I want to be part of this, in the same way I'm sure.
Well, for me, it's certainly for me, it's the element of performance.
Performance,
exactly. You see,
and the moment you're nervous before a show. And
so you thought that was theatrical partly then?
Well, no, I didn't think that. I'm just saying that it's certainly in the context of my past experiences. I mean, I understand the element of performance, and so I can see that in many areas. So it's poetry or whatever it is, but certainly in the area of acting.
Well, what you did was for sure poetry, but also I would say was the 21st century version, or 20th century in your case, of theatre. That's what will be remembered as the 20th century.
It had a theatrical element.
Incredibly
and
theatrical.
What the cast love it when you go down, Jimmy, and encourage them. Sometimes even before they actually perform, have a little word with them, and I think I can see them comforted by your support. I really.
That's our job as an older generation is to encourage other people.
No, I agree.
Yes,
that's I'm more interested in that performing myself. Do you ever get over stage fright? I don't know. I know in my recent performances I was terrified, even today, reading a poem. But for them, I think the important thing is they're safe in that group because they're with a group of like-minded people. And as you say, before it's gone totally professional, a lot of the performance we see, you've got often what I would call a friendly audience. And that makes that helps with
I sort of reanalyse stage fright. I'll give you a good example of it, of where it ought to have taken over, or could have done, was just doing one show at the O2 with Led Zeppelin, the last show that we did in 2007. And really, there was so much on it for your reputation, and it's like a 2.5-hour set. Are you going to be able to remember everything and all the rest of it? And what happens if there's a train wreck, and all this sort of stuff could start taking over. But as I said, I'd already sort of reanalyzed stage fright and thought of it more in a more positive way, and seeing it more as like the adrenaline tap turning on up front in advance, because you're pacing yourself towards this performance, and not let it, and just think of it in that way and not a negative way.
I think it helps with confidence. I think it's about the actors can learn to receive applause, and hopefully not let it go to their heads.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I always think of it as I always like the idea of the comfort zone, that you can live your life in a comfort zone, or you can step outside that circle. And when you step outside that circle, as they do and we've all done, is what you feel. You actually feel a very common human emotion, which is fear. And we're taught as human beings that when you feel uncomfortable, that you step quickly back inside the circle. But I know if you stand outside that circle for long enough, what happens is that, like the pebble dropped into the lake, the ripples go out and your comfort zone gets bigger. And that's all we ever did, one step at a time.
Yeah.
And you feel a great sense of satisfaction too.
That you feel the fear and do it anyway, follow your fear to find your destiny.
I'd just like to add one thing about the outside edge. I call it an ensemble. I think that's an important word. It's not like you're the star, you're the supporting actor, you're the walk-on. It's a true me. I was fortunate enough to work with Joan Littlewood and really understand what ensemble performance was. And this message, as Phil was a fan of hers, as am I, as indeed Susie Miller, the director now, is a fan, it's an ensemble piece. Everyone's involved. So it removes the hierarchy. Remember, the actors have got very fragile low self-worth in early recovery. So it's encompassing and it's supportive. And that's a really important component of the success of Outside Edge.
I learnt a lot from it in the very early days of actually seeing the productions, and I've learnt more and more as I've gone through and seen more and more productions, and what I've learnt is the power of people working together. And these people are in recovery too. It's an extraordinary story, this, with Outside Edge. It really is. And I must say, I'm just really happy to be part of it.